Hi coaches, welcome to powerforparkinsons.com. Today is going to be a wonderful learning experience that I got to be honest with you, I'm really excited about myself. And if you think of a question throughout our tutorial that you'd like to ask that maybe we didn't cover, feel free to reach out and contact me and I will get back to you as soon as possible. But let's go ahead and get started. As you know, every time we evaluate a new boxer, one of the things that we have to do is go through that list of symptoms from tremor to rigidity, falls, how many falls have you had in a year? And one of those questions is also about vision issues. And that's not a topic a lot of us know a lot about, which is why I thought, I want to learn more about this. So let's get right to it. As you know, every time we assess a new boxer for Rock Steady, we review with them a list of symptoms such as tremor, rigidity, how many times have you fallen in the last year, and so forth. And one of the questions has to do with vision. Well, to be honest with you, until I started Rock Steady Boxing Music City, my private clients that I was working with who happened to be living with Parkinson's, they really didn't have any vision issues. It was not something that was something really bothering them. However, when I started Rock Steady, that's when I started to see a lot of people coming in experiencing all kinds of vision issues, such as light sensitivity, blurred vision, double vision, excessive tears, extreme dry eyes, difficulty moving their eyes. And what I mean by that is maybe starting the movement or being able to follow a movement. They also had sensitivity to contrast, so maybe difficulty seeing in dim light, or perhaps trying to see a light color on a light background, or maybe even reading the fine print on something. And the list goes on: color vision, visuospatial orientation, glaucoma, hallucinations, retinal dopamine deficiencies, and there's probably more that I'm not even listing here. Now, to be fair, some of these issues are not related entirely to Parkinson's. As we age, we can develop some of these issues. But since so many of our people deal with vision issues, I think it's really important for us as coaches to know as much about it as possible and ways that we can help them in class. And I think you're going to be surprised at how easy it is to help them in class. And we'll go over that at the very end. But to help us better understand vision issues in Parkinson's and maybe even a little bit of PSP, is our very special guest, Dr. Jamie Ho. Now, Dr. Jamie Ho is a neurodevelopmental optometrist who specializes in working with patients with vision issues from stroke, brain injury, and other neurodegenerative diseases. Her other specialty is low vision, which deals with rehabilitation for those who have vision distortion and field loss from conditions such as diabetes and macular degeneration. She is one of the few optometrists in the United States who is board certified and holds a dual fellowship from the American Academy of Optometry and the College of Optometrists in Vision Development. She graduated from the Illinois College of Optometry in Chicago and completed a residency at the New England College of Optometry in Boston. Her private practice, Ho Vision Group in Brentwood, Tennessee, has a mission. It's very simple and I love it: to guide, provide, and support the vision potential of every patient through compassion and innovation. You can find her on the web at www.hovisiongroup.com, and that's HOVISIONGROUP.com. Welcome, Dr. Ho. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yay, this is exciting. Okay, let's start with the most obvious question. What made you decide to become a neuro-optometrist?
So it was an interesting journey. I actually started clinically at school doing research for lazy eye or amblyopia. And so here we have the specific group I work with is a group of children. They have a big difference in prescriptions between the two eyes. And what most people don't know about lazy eye, it's not only that the patient has a lazy eye on one eye and they think, well, the other eye's good, so we're fine, is that lazy eye actually causes reduced depth perception and a lot of visual spatial difficulties that are common with also your Parkinson's patients. And so when you have a prescription difference, it's basically like each eye has a different channel. And for the brain to put that together, it's a lot more difficult. And so we have children, they would literally walk into walls, even though health-wise, they're absolutely fine. It's a brain problem and not an ocular health problem. So later on, I actually did a residency in community health, and I saw a lot of patients who had a lot of retina disease. And I eventually got hired by a retina specialist while I was in Boston. And the same problem kept coming back. So I had patients with low vision. They actually had missing spots in their vision because of a retina problem. And one of the interesting things was I'd give them the magnifier and I said, okay, that's about the same power of magnifier I expect them to do well on. And they came out with the same problem. They had difficulties referencing space. So vision, in my opinion, is not just about seeing clear. It's not about seeing that 20/20 line. It's about how you reference space. And so then when I moved to Nashville from Boston, then I started working with brain injury. And with brain injury, it's interesting. We do have patients who have visual field loss, and they have parts of their vision that are missing, and that makes space very hard to navigate. But we also have concussion patients, and concussion patients, a lot of times, they will be able to see 20/20 when they're best corrected, but they suffer from the same problems. They have difficulties navigating space. They might tell us that, wow, I'm being overwhelmed because I just walked into a big grocery store and it's busy. They also have problems judging motion and contrast, just like some of the things that you see in the boxers. And the most interesting thing is that brain scans, everything tells us that they are fine. And so many of these patients, they're being told, it doesn't relate to your vision. And what we're going to talk about today, these are what we call functional vision problems.
That's very interesting. Wow. And how long have you been working at your own practice now?
I've been doing this for about 5 years now.
Wow. She's amazing. Very good. All right. So I've just listed this long list of potential eye issues that somebody can have living with Parkinson's or even PSP. Can you explain why is that happening? What's going on in the brain that all of a sudden somebody who's never had a dry eye issue before, now they do, or maybe somebody who's never had a depth perception issue before, now they do? What's going on?
So I'm going to talk about dry eye first because that's the easy part.
And you can talk about any of these that we've listed because they're all interesting.
We'll go into everything.
Yeah.
So the first thing is dry eye. A lot of times the brain is in charge of all these little fine eye movements that our eyes have to do for day to day. And so we really have an oversimplification of vision. So everyone always talks about vision being like a camera or a camcorder. But in actuality, the brain actually does a lot of things and it modifies. It's like editing after we've done the initial taping. And so for the dry eye specifically, they have a lot of these Parkinson's patients, they actually have reduced blink. So they're not blinking. And many of them might blink at half the rate of a normal person. And so when you don't blink as much, obviously the surface is going to get dry and it's going to get irritated. But more so in terms of the visual skills, there are lots of visual skills. So seeing 20/20 is just one skill. It's called, that's called central vision or visual acuity. And there's about 20 different types of skills. So you have the central vision, which is, can you see it? Is it clear? Is it sharp? What color is it? And then you have your side vision. Side vision actually processes in black and white, and it's in charge of motion detection. And so a lot of patients with Parkinson's also have impaired motion detection.
Right.
We also have what I call, the next will be the eye movement skills. So one, yes, you talked about tracking. So can you track a smooth moving object? Can you, those are called pursuits. And then there are saccades, which is, can you jump from one object to another object? Back to object, back to object. And these are controlled by different parts of the brain. Next, we kind of have what I call the eye coordination or eye teaming. So are the eyes aligned? Are they pointing to the same place and same direction? So if we have an eye misalignment, sometimes if you see a patient with an eye turn, or sometimes we see children with an eye turn, the eyes are not pointing to the same direction in space. What happens is the brain decides two things. Is, well, I can either decide I'm going to stay awake for both channels, and so it might see an object here, and then it might see the object here, which is kind of confusing. So what the brain can do is it can decide, I'm going to shut off the other image, because now I only have one image, less confusion.
Right.
But if we can't shut off the other image, that's when we see double vision. Okay, so there's eye alignment, and then there's eye coordination. And so when I look at something far away, our eyes have to diverge in space. When you look up close, you can see me, I'm kind of getting cross-eyed.
Right.
The eyes turn in. And so this is all coupled with eye focusing as well. And so eye focusing is what allows us to see things up close clearly and then look far away. And as we get older, that naturally gets slow. It slows down a little bit. That's why we need reading glasses. And the last thing is probably what we call integration, so visual integration. So vision talks to other sensory systems in our body. So one of the biggest examples is it talks to our body for balance. It also talks to our ear, the vestibular system in the ears. And when this talking doesn't happen properly, then we get dizziness and visual disorientation.
You know, a lot of my boxers anyway, and maybe for y'all as well, but a lot of them complain about dizziness. And I've gotten to where I don't, when we're talking about it, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, is there a medication change? Did you just get up too fast?
Yes.
But now I'm beginning to think sometimes it has more to do with what's going on between the eyes and the ears, and because of what you just said. Is there a way to kind of narrow it down so that we can help them as coaches know whether, okay, maybe you need to call your doctor for talk about your medicine, or maybe you need to go see someone like you? Is there a way of knowing whether it's
kind of visual or not
visual or
so
medicinal?
It's interesting you say that. So I always tell all my patients, balance and orientation come from three things. So one, your body. So we have patients who have prior injuries. Obviously, they're weaker on one side, and we got to watch that. And you got to watch that as a coach.
Right.
Patients who've had a stroke and they have plegia. That's another example. And then you have the vestibular system in the ears. So everyone, typically most medical professions, if you report constant dizziness, they're going to send you for a vestibular workup. And so the vestibular organ is a system in the ears, and it's in charge of telling us where our head and body are in space. But the third thing that, just like you alluded to, it could be vision. So the brain kind of does a checkpoint, and it looks at kind of left versus right side. So that comes in your body, left versus right side in the ears. And we also got to watch for other complications, like if patients have Meniere's or they have ringing in the ears, they have, structural hearing loss and things like that. And then the visual system. And so one of the big things, and I was going to talk about it, is does their vision change when they move their heads?
Oh,
and so one of the exercises that I wanted to talk about was kind of what we call gaze stabilization. So if they look at a small target, and I usually say about 3 feet away, something small, something with detail. And if they're looking at it and they're moving their head side to side, I call it kind of yes, no. It's easy to remember. So you're going yes and no. Does that image stay clear? Now, if that image, if they start doing this and they do about 10 cycles of it and all of a sudden everything gets blurry, we know that their visual system and their vestibular system is not very well integrated because that particular reflex, that is what's in charge of helping us keep our visual world stable. So when we move side to side and up and down, basically the vestibular system is telling our brain, okay, we're moving, and to keep that image appearing still to you at least, the eyes have to do a counter movement. And if the eyes cannot keep up with the vestibular signal, then they get blur. And so these are the patients, and you'll see them, and they're, probably doing a lot of workout, or they're feeling, sometimes even they're talking about car sickness, is their head's in movement, and we're never really all the way still. Our head is in movement, but these are the patients that come like, oh, I'm dizzy now, and that tells me a lot that they're not very well integrated.
Would you say that's a drill that we as coaches could do? It seems very simple.
Yeah, very simple.
And if they see the vision change, then we know, okay, you need to search out for someone like you in their community. Okay, that's great. Is it possible for someone to have 3 or 4 of these issues living with Parkinson's?
Easily. So there's, remember, it's all about fine-tune control. So, I listed all these different skills, and I look at 3 properties of each skill. So 1, can you do it? If it's like I'm asking you to lift a 10-pound weight and you can only lift an 8-pound weight. So, okay, you can't get quite to where I want you to be. Number 2, do you have stamina? So you can lift the 10-pound weight, but you can do it for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Again, not great for everyday life. And the third thing is, do you have flexibility? So if I want you to lift that 10-pound weight and then you can do it, but I give you a 9-pound weight and you can't do it for the life of you.
Yeah.
And so remember, vision has to move freely through space. It's like breathing. You don't really want to think about it. But sometimes when we have neurodegenerative diseases, yes, we start to actually lose these efficient eye movements and visual perceptual skills as well.
Is it possible that some people living with Parkinson's will never experience eye issues, or do they eventually develop over time some issues?
It's pretty common, I would say, because research tells us over 50% of the brain's surface is dedicated to eye movement, eye control, and visual perception. And so anytime, and this isn't unique to Parkinson's or, PSP, but we see this all around in different neuro diseases, multiple sclerosis, stroke. And that's also why we see these same things happen in brain injury, even with really young patients.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Now, you've talked about somebody with an eye turn before, and I kind of want to move into the different topics of movement, of eye movement. There's pursuits, there's saccades. Did I say that correctly? I think there's also, is there one called vergence or?
So we talked a little bit about that. So pursuits is your ability to track a smooth moving object, okay? And then the saccades are the ability to jump from one space to the other. And, we use a combination to be able to read, for example. Vergence is, again, the eye teaming. So that's the general term, but convergence is the ability for the eyes to turn in, and divergence is the ability for the eyes to turn out. And so a lot of Parkinson's patients, we do see have reduced ability to turn the eyes inward.
Okay.
And so that's why we have a lot of reading complaints from this particular population.
Well, and that's interesting because one of our questions on this list of symptoms is difficulty concentrating or focusing on something. And just now when you said that, I thought, I wonder, a lot of them will say, well, I just can't read anymore, or I can't watch a movie anymore. I wonder if that has less to do with, actually, I'm wondering if it has more to do with vision than it does that they just have lost the ability to concentrate.
You're absolutely right, because we always assume that eye movements just happen, right? And that, again, it comes back to, do these visual skills happen freely and without effort? So the visual system actually takes a lot of energy to maintain. And when it's not efficient, it can drag down everything. And so, these are the patients. And one of the symptom on the symptom survey is, do you have these problems at the end of the day? And so a lot of patients, when they're tired or they're fatigued or they're just really stressed out, they'll notice the vision gets worse. And it's like they just can't maintain their own visual system.
I've actually had boxers say that very thing, something stressful going on in their life. They've noticed not only are their tremors worse, but perhaps their vision has become more blurred, or their depth perception is a little bit more obvious to them. So that's very interesting that you should say that. Is there anything we can do that we can do as coaches to help them with things like pursuit and saccades? I know we've talked about the gaze holding issue or the gaze holding drill, but could coaches maybe take a piece of paper and draw circles and have them hop from one circle to the other, or maybe numbers? Is that something that we could do to help them in class?
Yeah, so that is actually, so those are some of the exercises that I do with them also from the vision rehab side. So we do get them to, do a saccade. So you jump from one target to the other target to the other target. And there's a certain amount of stamina I expect in the system. You can do smooth tracking. I tell my patients, you have nothing else around you, just use your own thumb and just close one eye. And we want to, again, tease out each eye and see, is there a big difference between the eyes? Remember, the eyes have to team together. So if there are big differences between the eyes, just like the Mylazy eye patients, then it makes it harder to work together as a team. One of the other things that I stress is, visual searching, visual scanning. So we can actually introduce different targets, and you look at a target, look at another, look at a target while you're doing, what you're doing with boxing. We're engaging the body, we're also engaging the visual system, and we're engaging the head, the vestibular system in the ears. One of the other topics I was going to bring up is posture. Posture is so important in this patient base. And so all voluntary eye movements are driven by attention, and posture influences attention. And so when you have patients who are kind of curled up in a ball, they're a lot less engaging than if they were sitting up straight. And so it's so important. One of the things I think would be beneficial is really working on the head and neck, the upper shoulders, the neck muscles, making sure that they're as strong as possible so that they maintain as positive a posture to be more receptive of the visual environment.
And we're actually going to go over some great exercises that you can do with your boxers and your coaches, if you want to, in class at the very end of that. So let's talk about what you do on a daily basis to help people that come to see you living with Parkinson's to improve their ability to see and have a better understanding of the area around them. What do you do in your office?
So we start off with a full assessment, and I want to look at individual patient skills. So what they're good at, what they're not good at. So we talked about all those different eye movements. So there's clinical ways to measure for them. I do also look at reaction speeds. And so, we might have them use my light board where we're tapping, and I'm looking at, how much eye-hand coordination and their ability to also kind of hold back and sometimes hold back on certain types of stimuli. We have a board that, I might tell them, I need you to look for the red dot. And so they have to search, they have to scan how well integrated, again, visual motion. So yes, we do have patients we do that test to see if they're well integrated or is the visual system trailing behind the head movement. I also assess for visual system influencing their posture. So we have a lot of our patients walk up and down the hall, and I see, are they leaning on one side versus the other? Do they have an idea of where space is relative to them? And so sometimes some of them, you'd be surprised, I might give them a target in space, and I said, okay, I want you to tap this target. And I asked them, can they see it? And they said, yes. And all of a sudden they're tapping about a foot off from the target.
Yes.
And so we want to take a look at all these visual skills as a whole before I come up with a treatment plan. So a typical treatment plan, I'll look at whether or not there's some lenses that can benefit for the patients. And the lenses might not be what everyone thinks. So most patients go to see an optometrist. They might be like, I'm nearsighted or I'm farsighted. I need glasses to just, see clear. Again, all these visual processing mechanisms are playing in the background. And so sometimes it's not just about seeing clear. We can actually prescribe different things into the supports, such as Prism. Prism can shift space. So if I have a patient that's moving off in space or their visual system tends to posture down, I can actually use Prism to shift that space upward so that they have better awareness. We also use maybe selective occlusion. So if I have a patient who's seeing double a lot and I don't have a prescription that can work well with them, I might just put a little bit of tape on one side and work on each side until I can get the eyes to work as a team again. And then the last thing that a lot of my patients need is what we call visual rehabilitation. Visual rehabilitation is therapy. And just like how you're working with your boxers, visual system, we can use therapy and different tools and techniques to teach a visual system to become more efficient and more effortless and help it integrate so that it talks well with the rest of the body.
Wow, that is so interesting. You never have 2 days exactly the same, do you?
I never have two patients exactly the same.
And I think our coaches would say the same thing. We never really have two boxers that are exactly alike. That you've heard the saying, if you've met one person with Parkinson's, it just means you've met one person with Parkinson's, because they all have their own, they all bring their own unique set of symptoms and issues that we're dealing with. What's completely fascinating. Well, we thought it would be fun to try a pair of Prism glasses. So we're going to give that a shot and see how it goes. But before we do, one of the things that you'll find on the website this month is a chart. I'm going to start using this because sometimes, like I told her earlier, I have somebody come in and they say, yeah, I've got really dry eyes, or I've got double vision, or one of the other issues that I've maybe mentioned, hallucinations, whatever it is. And sometimes we don't know if that's related to the medicine or is that a visual issue and it needs to be handled by a neurooptometrist. So Dr. Ho sent me this chart. And why don't you tell us a little bit about this chart? I know it's primarily for brain injury, but there is one slot here that says, I do not have a brain injury, but it's still very useful for, I think, our population. So why don't you tell us about it?
So this is the Brain Injury Vision Symptom Survey, or BIVSS. It was released from one of the large organizations, NORA, Neuro-Optometric Rehab Association. And so we're going to put a link for that. It's noravisionrehab.org. And it's a symptom survey. There's not a lot. Again, it all fits in a page. So there's about 20 questions here. And each question, it will ask a list of surveys, and the patient grades it from 0 to 4. 0 meaning they never have the symptom, 4 meaning they always have the symptom. And so you just kind of tally it up. So for example, some of the questions will be, do you have eye discomfort, sore eyes, eye strain? Or do your eyes fatigue at the end of each day? Or you feel like pulling around the eyes? Or do you get double vision? Or you cover one eye to see clear. So you rate this 0 to 4 and you go down the list. And if you have a score that's over 31, we should actually really send these patients to be evaluated by a neurooptometrist. Another resource that I'm going to point out is College of Optometrists and Vision Development, covd.org. Again, both NORA and COVD have search engines for providers, and you just type in your zip code and it will pull up the nearest provider.
That's great. So this will be on the website, and you can use it in your Rocksteady boxing. And I know it's going to help me be able to provide for them better, plan for them better. And if it's something that I know that Dr. Ho can help us with, you better believe I'm going to be sending them to her because she does great work. Okay, and I do have another question. I know you've seen this probably, where somebody will have an eye that's a little bit higher or lower than the other, or maybe one that's out a little bit more. What is that about? And is there anything we can do?
So if the eyes, that goes back to one of the basic eye skills. So eyes are not lined up. So especially vertical alignment can be really disruptive. And a lot of times that will result in them seeing more double. And so one of the things I like to do is I like to see, well, does head posture influence it? So if I move the head side to side and up and down, and if the eyes line up more, I know, we can use some of that to our advantage. But sometimes those deviations are too far apart. So part of my assessment is to see whether or not we can get those two images to line up more efficiently. The brain likes to process things, again, with two sides. So if I don't have to cover one side versus the other, and I definitely don't encourage that. Do not, black out an eye, because we lose a lot of information when we do that.
Right.
But we want to get the eyes to team together as easy as possible. And sometimes, we have to just put those supports into a pair of glasses.
Okay. That is so interesting. So it is possible to realign the eyes.
Yes.
How long does that take?
Some people, it can be instantly. Some people, I will tell a lot of my patients who see double vision, if I can get the glasses to line you up most of the time, or even more than what they come in with, I'll be happy. But I like to typically use some vision rehabilitation techniques so that I build that stamina around it, and that the patient has more control. So at the end of the day, they don't have to depend so much on the glasses. They, it might make them feel more comfortable, but they'll be capable of lining up themselves as much as possible.
Now, several of my boxers have come to you, and they have received prisms. Is that something they use forever?
Some patients might need it. So for those who have neurological conditions that can be progressive, they might need that support. We prescribe prisms for many different reasons. And so if it's a temporary condition, sometimes they might not need it anymore. I have some patients who have those prism supportive glasses, and they might not ever use it unless they get really stressed out again. Sometimes their stamina decreases over time for other reasons, or for neurological, hopefully nothing progressive. But usually most of my patients will keep them, and some of them will be able to graduate from the prisms and no longer need them.
Wow. Now, I know for a lot of people, losing their driver's license is a big deal.
Yes.
And I think that is totally understandable. Have you experienced people living with Parkinson's being able to get their driver's license back because of some simple changes in their glasses? Or?
Yes, we work with a lot, not only Parkinson's, but as I mentioned, work with a lot of stroke and other types of brain injury patients. And so driving is a complex skill. And so along with all the integration, they got to be able to shift their attention from different types of space. They got to be able to kind of do simultaneous and different movements, not only the eye hand, but also general coordination. And so assessing for driving is definitely one of the challenges. And so if it's just a visual skill, we have been successful in rehabilitating. We also work with other therapists in the area so that we can work on these different skills that kind of extend beyond what I do.
Yeah.
And so it's important to recognize that, we're all just part of a team and collaborative effort. And I don't look at problems as being just, isolated vision, though, that's my world. But we get much better results when we kind of work with the respective individuals and their specialties. And so I always tell my patients, you need a team, and you need to have a good team to get you where you're going.
And it's important for that team to communicate. And one of the things that I have my boxers do is when they go to PT and or maybe Dr. Ho, they can sign a piece of paper that gives her permission to talk to me about what you're doing so that we can be on the same page. And that's the same for OT, PT, doctors, and that just helps everybody work together. And so there aren't any puzzle pieces missing. So the more we communicate within our our team, the more successful our boxers are going to be.
Yeah.
Yay. Awesome. So we're going to give these prism glasses a try. You ready for this?
Sure.
Okay.